Hi there. Um, Hopefully you're here because you're interested in changing habits, or you're just trying to see what I said, or you're just sort of like found me and have absolutely no idea what I'm going to talk about. That's beside the point. Today I'd like to talk about changing habits, and again, I want to repeat that some of these ideas came out of this little book, seriously, little book. Not big at all. A lot of it, I'm actually, adding some of my thoughts to it, obviously, but at least that was the origin. So if anybody's interested in it, and or you're thinking that I'm getting these ideas from somebody, yeah, you're right. It's from here. Anyway, when you're trying to change a habit, usually, let's just say, for the sake of argument, you're thinking about maybe food, which is a common habit people want to change. And I usually say something to the effect of, I'm never going to eat anything again. Yeah, right, likely. Or maybe you smoke and you want to stop smoking. It's like, I'm not going to smoke a cigarette again. Or I'm not going to have a drink again. Or something like that. Frequently. Not always, but frequently. There's usually going to be something. The first comment is going to be something that's pretty much all or nothing. I'm not going to do this again as long as I live. Um, you have a tendency to like to say eat Doritos, and I'm just using that as a sake of argument, nothing, or an example rather. Nothing against Doritos, mind you. It's just I didn't want to go into a long list of things, so I'm just using Doritos, okay? So it's like, okay, I'll never eat another Dorito, or I'm never, as I said, never going to do whatever. This usually isn't going to work, as most of you probably already know, because you've tried to do it before about 6,000 times, which is also another, extreme, right? So, what might work out better? Actually think about what it is that you really, really want to change. Now, you're going to say, well, yeah, I want to do this. I want to lose weight. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you want to do this. You want to stop smoking. You want to lose weight. You want to stop drinking. You want to do what this, that, or the other. Yes, but what is it you really want to change? Let's get down to the really nitty gritty. Okay. So if you were going to say something like, I want to lose weight, and instead of saying something like, I'll never eat food again as long as I live, which you know it's not going to work, or I'll never eat junk food, or something like that, that's probably not going to happen. So the idea would really be to start thinking in terms of some small old habit that you've got that needs to change. Now, let me talk about habits for a minute here. Habits can be really, really good, really, really good. Because if we didn't have habits, we would be spending all of our time pretty much trying to figure out what we're going to do next. Think about it. You get up in the morning, you have a habit, you have a routine. Without that routine, without that habit, you would get up in the morning and have to literally decide what you were going to do first, what you're going to do second. And that's every single day. That gets to be, really difficult. So if you ever had your routine disrupted and then have to stop and sit there and say, wait a minute, I can't do this. What am I going to do instead? You realize how difficult this could be. So we start our habits basically because they accomplish a point at some they accomplish a task at some point in time. Then we get into them to be habituated, and it keeps on going. Some of our habits really work well for us. Other habits, not so well. Sometimes things change and make the habits not work anymore. Let me say, for example, a student of mine once, and this is a true story, and I was teaching a traditional classroom, and we somehow got on the topic of habits, and she made the comment that during that particular term, she moved. She was discovering is that when she left school, she got in a car and she'd end up driving home, and she ended up at the old place. She pretty much would pull into the old driveway and stop and sit there and say, what have I done? This is not where I'm going. And it went on like this for days and weeks. And that may have been why she started talking about it in the class, because she wanted to see if I had any comments about it. So, but this is an example of what I mean by habits. You get into the habit of doing something like going to work in a particular way. And if you suddenly have to change that because the road's blocked, whatever, you have to really stop and think about what you're going to do instead. If you're out in a relatively rural area and you can't use one road, that gets to be difficult sometimes if you don't have any other options or many other options. So this is what I mean when I say sometimes habits can be really helpful because they're accomplishing a purpose, and sometimes it's becomes such something that we do so automatically that we don't stop to think if there's a better way to do it. Okay? So when you stop to think about the habits, whether it's Doritos or smoking or drinking or whatever, you probably started it for a specific reason that at the moment you started it, you thought was beneficial to you. Now, whether it really was or not, that's beside the point. At the moment you started it, you saw a beneficial reason for doing whatever it was. And over time, things just got to the point that it's no longer beneficial. Okay? Does that make sense? So let's go back and find one small little thing that we're going to change that's going to be relatively easy, that you can, within reason, do. Okay? So let's just say something to the effect of the Doritos. Instead of saying I'll never eat Doritos again as long as I live, which is probably not possible because you're going to go to a party or something's going to happen or whatever. Um, think in terms of when you eat those Doritos, and is there a way that you can possibly do something instead? Say, let's just say for the sake of argument that you know that you tend to, let's say you have a sandwich at lunch and you have a few Doritos with your sandwich. That may not be bad. But if you go down and you watch a particular program or and you watch something on Netflix or something like that, and then you pull out a bag of Doritos and go through the whole bag, that you might want to change. So this is what I mean when I say think in terms of the habits that you want to change, because maybe a few Doritos at lunch with your sandwich may not be so bad, but binging on the whole bag, watching Netflix, probably not so cool. So maybe what you would like to do is say, okay, what I'd like to do is eat more healthy or stop eating Doritos when I watch Netflix. Identify that specific feeling or that specific task and see, what is it that you're feeling and what are you thinking about and what can you do instead? Okay. So maybe let's say you want to stop smoking. Think in terms of something that triggers your smoking. Frequently for people, it's a cigarette after a meal. Frequently, it's a cigarette when you first get up in the morning. So if somebody else is smoking, you want to smoke. Find a specific habit that you would like to stop, just one, that you think you can do relatively easy. You're beginning to follow where I'm coming from with this. So again, if you want to, maybe your food is you just want to eat healthy. Maybe the issue is not to stop eating something. Maybe you want to eat more healthy in the first place. So maybe you can think in terms of, okay, what's a healthy food that I can eat, that I enjoy, that I can add into my meals during the course of the week. So look at something that you can do that's going to be relatively easy to make a change. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to be perfect at this, but that it's going to be easier for you to change than to just go to cold turkey and never do whatever it is again. Or suddenly you're a junk food addict and you want to become a vegetarian. It's not going to happen likely. Well, okay, let me back up. There is a possibility. Frequently, something like this will happen. And you may have heard stories about people who do make these changes that they stop and never do things again or do things again. Usually there's some kind of trauma that goes along with it. And I'm going to put trauma in quotes in this particular case. Um, let me give you a story. Way back when in ancient history, I'm allergic. Quite possibly that I was born allergic from the day I was born. My mother was a really strong, heavy-duty smoker. As I understand it, she was a really heavy chain smoker. Her parents were heavy-duty chain smokers. It's quite possible, knowing what I know now, that because she was a chain smoker and she continued, and there was at that point, there was no problem with that. Nobody said anything about it. And because she did it when she was pregnant with me, that may have contributed to my allergies. Perhaps, could be, who knows? But that's beside the point. Anyway, she reports that I had my first asthma attack, or at least that she recognized as an asthma attack when I was 18 months old. For those of you who are parents, and even those of you who aren't parents, you can probably realize this probably freaked her out quite a bit. That was the first asthma attack, she says. Sooner or later, she began to recognize the fact that I had trouble breathing, and I would start coughing and have issues when cigarette smoke was around, especially if she was changing my diaper or something like that and she was smoking, I could start coughing. It's dawned on her that the cigarette smoke was impacting my breathing. So she checked it out and she discovered that, yes, in fact, it did. At that moment, my mother decided to stop smoking. Now, I wouldn't say that that was trauma necessarily, but it was enough of an impact of something on her that she decided, I'm not going to do this again. Now, you could also have a situation in which you discover that if you don't stop smoking, you're going to die. That's a different kind of issue, but it's still that something is happening to make you aware that this is not a good thing and I don't want to do it again, but enough of an impact on you that you decide right then and there that you're not going to do it. I also have a smaller issue. Way back when in ancient history, we had moved and I was coming to a new school. And I very clearly remember this was in eighth grade. And I wasn't paying, it was English class. I wasn't paying any attention to my English teacher, what was going on. I have no clue what was going on. But I was sitting in the back of a classmate, and I just thought she was just everything that I wanted to be. She was tall, she was skinny, she had this beautiful hair, and it was all nice and wavy, and it looked beautiful. And I always felt like I was just sort of like, And I'm sitting behind her, and I'm looking at that hair, and I'm looking at her clothes, and I'm looking at how she goes about everything. And at that moment, I said, I'm going to stop biting my nails because that was the way I could think of getting somewhat closer to being the image of what she was that I wanted to be. I haven't bitten my nails since. Seriously, and this has been decades. This is like, we won't go into how long ago it was, but trust me, it's been a long, 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 long time. Again, that was another circumstance that it wasn't what I would call trauma, but it was something that was important enough to me that I made a decision right then and there that I wasn't going to do. Okay. So you don't have to necessarily be facing a really major issue to make a decision to stop doing something. On the other hand, there have been a ton of instances in my life that I wanted to change behaviors, and I haven't made anything quite as abrupt, if you will, as that decision not to bite my nails anymore. So use a combination of something of effects on that. Just think about what's going on, because there may have been something that you may have changed your mind just because of something sudden too. But anyway, the point, think in terms this going week of something that you could do and you could change, something small, because you want something that's doable. You don't want something that's going to be almost impossible to do right off the bat. And think about that and start thinking about how you could make those changes and incorporate those into your life. Okay? And see what happens. And let me know. This went a little long, but hopefully it was useful. So if you have any questions or any comments or anything, let me know, and we'll see what we can go on about talking more about habits next week. So have a good day, and Penny's over there under the pink. So we'll see you if you're interested in knowing where she is. We'll see you next week. Bye.